The HR Stories podcast is brought to you by the team at HR Stories. The team at HR Stories helps businesses, nonprofits, and HR practitioners better manage the employee experience, providing the tools, training, and resources needed to get HR right. For more information, check out our website at theteam@hrstories.com. Each week on the HR Stories podcast, HR and leadership experts John Thalheimer and Chuck Smikian dive into the stories that matter most to you, our listeners. We have found that there is a lesson in every story. And now our host, John Thalheimer and Chuck Smikian. All right, listeners, welcome to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story.
Yeah, John, I got to tell you, this is, it's exciting. It's our first episode with a live audience.
Live studio audience. Yeah, it's kind of like working without a net, right? Usually we have a little more freedom. We could stop and go and do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, are you nervous at all? I got to ask you, are you nervous?
I think not nervous, but maybe a little more excited than nervous, but I don't want to mess it up, right? I don't want to make sure everyone has a good experience on there.
Yeah, well, you're not going to mess it up, but if you do, it'll be like every other week when we record the podcast.
All right. So what's going on? If people only knew how often we mess up, thank goodness for those editing times.
Right. So a lot of times what we do for those that are first time listeners is we do kind of like a what's in the news, what are some hot topics. John and I kind of share some things and we might editorialize a bit and share some of our past experiences. So John, what hot topics do we want to get into today?
Yeah, and I think the biggest one for all of us to be aware of, right? And we're all aware of it, but I don't know if we're all connecting it to the impact it's going to have on HR. But we're going to have a new administration in place, right? And so that administration, as the Biden administration, as the Trump administration before them, the Obama administration before them, they will make changes not only to the laws and regulations, but also how they enforce and interpret them as well. And so that's going to be a big thing. I think we're going to see a lot of subtle changes over the time that we all need to be paying attention from our HR small business owner viewpoint.
Yeah. Any specifics you want to mention?
Yeah, so let me mention a couple of these. So I think for anyone that is a federal contractor or works with a federal contractor or a subcontractor, the changes are going to be fast and big because the president, the administration, has direct influence over the federal employees and the contracts thereof. And so we're expecting to see changes in DEI that we know that in the Trump's previous administration, they really kind of got rid of a lot of the DEI language, which was brought back with the Biden administration. So we're going to see some of that. It'll be interesting, as you and I were talking about before the podcast, is immigration. And so we're going to see some of that play out on the federal level and the federal agencies. But expect that to be probably in the next 4 years. It's just going to be a major topic, and we're going to need to be paying attention to it. And what does that look like? And all those kind of things going on. I think wages, prevailing wages in particular in the federal area is going to need to be paying attention to. Now, outside of the federal government or the federal contract or state government, we need to be paying attention to the independent contractor ruling. We know that Trump limited how they looked at the 6 economic reality test. And so then the Biden went back to that, and now we're expecting them to go back to the way it was, right? And so we're going to see those changes, and we'll talk a little bit more about independent contractors in the show today. I think the wage and hour regulations, I think you and I talked about this on our last podcast, right? And so we know that the Biden administration, the Department of Labor had changed it up to $844. It was supposed to change to $1,128 January 1st. A judge vacated that ruling in November. And then the Department of Labor kind of slid this in there like, hey, we're appealing this and we're looking at this, right? And so we're going to need to be paying attention to some of that. OSHA regulations, all are coming in there. There's probably a lot more that we can get into, but I don't know if we have time today.
No, and I will echo that I just saw a something come across the news wires today, I think, regarding McDonald's now. So the DEI changes with what's going to be, you know, taught and as far as just generally the initiatives out there, a lot of companies are rolling things back or retooling them, and McDonald's is the latest one today. But I gotta tell you, John, I gotta ask you because I know the answer, but what if people want more information?
Yeah, so earlier in December, I recorded a full episode for the HR Stories podcast about the change in administration. So I go into details about 5 of the different subjects. And so I definitely think that's a great episode to listen to. That will come out. For those that don't know, I think most of you probably know this, but our new episodes come out every Tuesday. And so anytime you're there, you can kind of jump in there. And so listen, every Tuesday we come out and do new things in there as well. So Chuck, let's talk about hot topics for you. What story do you have today?
Well, this one's kind of near and dear because big fan of Publix. You know, here in Florida, there's Publix, and I guess they're obviously throughout the Northeast. I've even gone up as far as what North Carolina. I don't know if they're up there in Virginia with you, but just the last day of 2024. There was a recent lawsuit filed where Publix is accused of violating multiple federal and state laws after firing a pregnant employee who had requested accommodations for morning sickness and planned to take FMLA leave. And I caught my eye because number one, Publix is usually pretty buttoned down as a company and as far as HR is concerned. And then the other thing is, well, I shop at Publix a lot. So this is an employee. She was an inventory control analyst in Polk County, Florida. She said, despite being granted initially her request to work from home after the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, which is another thing that grabbed my attention because it's a new law, went into effect in June of 2023, and we predicted on the show the lawsuits are going to start rolling in, and they've over the last 6 months or so they have been popping up. So Publix terminates her shortly before her due date. The company said, hey, they gave some excuse or some reason about you're not completing your work without being logged in. And she says, hey, these are things, this is in the lawsuit, that have never previously been addressed, and non-pregnant employees are not penalized. So let me repeat that important point, John. Publix fired her for completing work without being logged in. All right. Whatever the reason they fired her. But in the lawsuit, and this is the big red flag for companies, and it's something that I trumpet all the time. In this, her cornerstone of her lawsuit is, hey, you never told me this was a problem, and you never disciplined similarly situated employees who weren't pregnant. So, we're going to follow this. I think this is actually going to make a great story, HR Stories podcast in the next couple of months as we follow it. But one other interesting thing here is that her supervisor at Publix really didn't oppose her accommodation. But this is another problem that I think myself and probably some of our listeners that are in HR run into. But it was her boss's boss that was dismissive and basically made comments. And so, those offhanded comments, and who knows if they were put in text messages or put in emails. But even if Publix followed the law on all this stuff, it's that prima facie, on face value. Could this have looked like discrimination? And could those comments and stuff led to them terminating her? And so it clouds things up. But anyways, I thought that was a pretty interesting story in the news, and I'm looking forward to following it.
Yeah, it's a great story. And again, it goes back to what I always say, or you and I both say, it's the manager, right? It's the manager that's enforcing these policies. And if HR, we can't get our managers aligned, it's going to be a problem, right? And so in
Yeah.
this case, I think her direct supervisor, from what I read, was like, all right, we need to give you these accommodations. All right, fine. Probably not, a little resistant at first, but understood it and was going to do it. And then the bigger boss was kind of pushing her, going, "No, I need you in. When you come in?" And I think those, we need to educate your management team, right? And so
Yeah.
I think, to me, that is critical. Paying attention to doing that and just kind of make sure that happens. Yeah, and so I'd love for you to follow that, Chuck, and kind of let us know what happens down the road.
Yeah. What do you got, John?
So I was reading, as you know, right? If you're Chuck's always kidding me about my reading. So I was reading the Nashville Business Journal, and it got my attention because there was an article in there, and this is about dress codes, and it said this: companies should consider changing their dress codes in 2025 as a way to boost employee retention and better reflect their company culture.
Okay.
And I gotta say, really? Like, that's gonna change your employee retention? That's gonna change your company. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I'm a big believer in matching your dress code to your company brand and making sure that it represents your company. But I don't think it's gonna have a large impact on employee retention and engagement at your company. Now, here's what they said. So, a couple of facts, Chuck, just kind of throwing them out.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
50% of employers have business casual dress codes, and 43% have casual dress codes, which is what now? That's like 97% have some kind of relaxed thing. So, not many people are having to wear suits anymore or dressing up on that high level. And then only 31% of managers said having a dress code guidelines was important.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
so I get it in certain circumstances that there should be a clear dress code and there should be oh, let me take that back. I think in every situation the dress code needs to be well defined, um, but it can be very lax, right? I think I told you this, Chuck, and I think we talked about it at the last show. I've been working with a nonprofit down in Nashville, and we're going over their employee handbook, right? So building that up and redoing it, and we had this long conversation about dress codes. They're a very relaxed organization, but a lot of times they're giving presentations in front of big organization groups, right? And so defining what that person should look like when they're presenting is an important conversation to have, right? And so kind of having that in there. But in terms of employee engagement and culture, I don't know if changing your dress code is going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know. The dress codes, the appearance guidelines, the grooming guidelines, all over the place. I grew up professionally in the 1980s at Disney, right? 80s,
Right.
early 90s, and very strict grooming and dress code. And I mean, there were some really, there were some things that had to change. I mean, they had height, weight guidelines and things like that. It was kind of embarrassing to enforce when I was a recruiter there. But as far as they've really loosened up. But I would have to say, and the whole thing with Disney was we didn't want our employees to detract from the show, right? We want everyone to kind of blend in and be part of the scenery and not take away from the show. But now there's no dress codes over there. I got to tell you, I'm not a fan. Not a fan. But it's not, I mean, look, when the security guard looks like the caveman from the Geico commercial, and another employee to me looked like the guy from Duck Dynasty. And, it's like, all right, I don't know. But I do think that in certain circumstances, either a mandatory or implied dress code, as far as in the offices are concerned, can lead people to maybe I don't know, lead a team, will say, hey, this is our atmosphere. This is our professional atmosphere. Maybe I don't see suit and ties anymore, but sometimes suit jackets. I don't know. I'm a fan of some sort of codes, but I tell people whatever fits your culture, that's that's where you want to go. Whatever brand you want to emulate, you want to do that. but it is interesting because I got to tell you, and this is going to divert. Just give me 60 seconds to go on this one. So the whole thing, Jimmy Carter, right? Jimmy Carter is, they're talking about now people are lauding him, applauding him. Some are saying, oh, he wasn't that great of a president or whatever. I was a young guy, a young kid. I was a kid when Carter became president. I remember this. And he was a governor of Georgia, right? So the presidency, right? Suit, tie, uh, uh, jackets, that sort of thing. And I remember there was the big scandal back in the when the Carter White House was, and there were pictures. I think it was in Time Magazine or Newsweek, and these guys were all his inner circle, all his cabinet. They're wearing jeans and hush puppies and loafers and just like, well, kind of shirts like this, I guess, but kind of like, kind of checkered type shirts. And they're just hanging out in the Oval Office, and they got their feet up on the chair, on the furniture, and people were like aghast, right? They were aghast, so, I guess it just all depends. So when I think about grooming and dress codes, I don't know, that kind of came across my memory banks here, but it all depends on what type of culture you're trying to go for. And like you said, I don't know, some places, and I will tell you, have loosened up the codes. I know Disney did and Universal did years before that, just to attract a more diverse group of clients, allowing tattoos and things like that. But some companies don't really go for that. But I don't know. I think the conversation is still out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good conversation to be thinking about. I don't know if I would say it's going to change your employee engagement, but it's kind of, again, I would love to hear from our audience and let them, like, what do you guys think? Just drop us a note in the Q&A. Wait, somebody had something in the Q&A, so why we're there.
Yeah, I love this place. I could wear whatever I want.
Yeah. Defining casual dress code and being unbiased, etc., is a ban of a lot of our existence. Do you include undergarments or not? How casual is too casual?
Yes.
It's a lot. Yeah. And so that's where I think you have to communicate that clearly, right? Again, having a dress code is important. You can't be like, oh, wear whatever you want. You and I've had numerous conversations about Black Lives Matter shirt, Confederate flags, and that kind of stuff, which get people in trouble. And so you have to be consistent with that, and undergarments and whatever that is can be there.
Yes,
So,
exactly. Well, we could go on and on. And folks, we have had several conversations and podcasts regarding the dress codes. And and John, I'll put those in the show notes.
Okay.
So that when we do post this up, people can go to a couple of those podcasts.
What other story you got, Chuck?
Yeah, so this was interesting. This very timely. This came across, it was in, I thought come across in HR Morning. HR Morning, their kind of news feed or whatever. But it's actually been in the news too. So while most of us are celebrating the holidays, right, there was a major legal battle in Hollywood. There's an actress named Blake Lively, and she filed a complaint against I guess there was a movie, right? It Ends With Us. Was that a movie or TV show? Probably.
That was a movie. It was a very good movie, done very well. We just watched it over the holiday break.
Okay, gotcha.
So yeah.
All right, so there was a director and the co-star, guy named Justin Baldoni, Justin Baldoni.
I think that's fair.
And he had a production company. So he's the director, it's his production company, and he's the co-star. So anyways, she and others are accusing him and this company of sexual harassment, fostering a toxic work environment. And this is actually interesting. Once again, it goes with what we talk about constantly. So Blake Lively is a female, and she complains or claims that this Justin Baldoni made inappropriate comments and that the studio failed to provide proper channel for reporting harassment. Apparently, John, the only option was to report concerns directly to Baldoni himself. And so, where does that leave you, right?
Yeah.
It's and so Anyway, so there's a lot of back and forth there. I think some of our listeners have probably seen this in the news, but Blake Lively's saying, look, this guy Justin Baldani and the team and production group launched a retaliatory smear campaign, screenshots, text exchanges. But here's the interesting thing, and this is one thing I want to bring up, because it's not only about the hostile work environment and the retaliation risks, and I didn't know this as I looked further into this, and this is another great topic for a full podcast. But there's the likability factor, and that's really playing into this. Apparently there's Team Justin, Team Blake, but Team Justin's basically saying no one likes Blake Lively. She is mean, she is nasty, she's unlikable. She's unlikable. And I know, as some of our listeners know, is you're going to get a complaint from someone on your team that's unlikable. And it could be a legitimate complaint. And so all complaints need to be handled objectively, regardless of the employee's likability, reputation. And I see it, I have seen it. And when the employee brings it up and they're not likable, or they're not liked, or they got other issues, and then you take that forward, there's a collective groan that you have to deal with, like, oh, not that person. Really? Really? Like, really? But if it's legit, you got to go all the way through. And the other thing is to have a way to report these things, right? I mean, if it's the director and the production company owner, and I'm sure this happened in California, so there's going to be all kind of other implications there. But anyways, stay tuned. I'm going to follow this. And like I said, I think it's actually going to make a great episode of the HR Stories podcast.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I love that story. One of the things, God, I forgot when it was, but back in like I guess it was during COVID, there was a young lady on social media, and she was one of the first intimacy coordinators on movies.
Okay.
And she did a really good job explaining what she did and why it was so important. And so ever since then, you start thinking about this when you have actors, right? And they're going to be in an intimate position, having someone to set what you're going to do and how are we going to do it and what is it going to look like is really important. And so in this case, in Blake Lively's case, they did not have one at the beginning of the movie. When this was came up, then there was one appointed, and I don't know how much they did, but that's just during the movies. That doesn't include offset conversations and that kind of stuff. And so Hollywood is just ripe for these kind of conversations because a lot of people don't just have any business sense and not paying attention to that. So.
Yeah. All right. So what else, John? Where do you want to go from here as we
I think it's time let's take our first break of the show. Let's do that.
All right. You've been listening to the HR Stories podcast, where there's a lesson in every story. Hey, it's Chuck here with the team at HR Stories. In the fast-paced world of HR, you need solutions fast. We are introducing our new book, The Ultimate Guide to HR Checklist Edition, your go-to resource for navigating the complexities of HR with confidence and ease. Hey, whether you're an experienced HR professional, a student, or a small business owner, this book is designed to give you immediate answers to a wide range of HR challenges. Wasting time sifting through endless reference books, unreliable web content, countless YouTube videos, our guide cuts through the noise with over 80 actionable HR checklists that cover everything you need in the world of HR, from onboarding and performance management to legal compliance, crisis response. We've got you covered. Why is this book a must-have? Because it provides you with immediate answers, saving you time, helping you avoid costly mistakes, and it's an essential tool for anyone looking to elevate their HR game. So head on over to the Ultimate Guide to HR.com. That's Ultimate Guide to HR.com to get your copy of the Ultimate Guide to HR Checklist Edition. Streamline your HR tasks, stay compliant, and create a workplace where both employees and management thrive. Welcome back to the HR Stories Podcast, live edition. We are recording this live with a studio audience. And obviously, the lesson is in every story, and we've told a few stories today. John, where do we want to head from here?
Yeah, I think this has been great checking within the audience members and seeing what's going on. And I'm glad they're participating and putting things in the Q&A. So that's always good for us to kind of do that. All right, Chuck, where do you want to go next?
Okay, let me think. So I'm enjoying this a lot. I think it's time, actually, we give away a free on-demand course from our library. John and I have, over the last year or so, at our team at hrstories.com, we've recorded and taught a number of classes, some HR 101 classes, some how to do an investigation classes, how to do an I-9 audit class, how to do an HR departmental audit. So, and one of my favorites also, the Americans with Disabilities Act, Demystified. So if you haven't checked us out, you want to go to team@hrstories.com, click on the workshop button. John, I'm going to choose someone right now. I'm going to point right there, and I've got Connie Weber. Connie was our first one in the room today. So Connie, congratulations. We will be getting with you on the code to go in, choose whatever class you want to download and watch for free. Folks, don't worry. We have a few more giveaways in the next 30 minutes or so.
So I just want to say something, Chuck. I think it was like a week ago. You called me up and you're like, oh my goodness, I was looking at our on-demand classes. These are great classes. I forgot about them. I need to check them out. And let me do that. It was just so funny, this joy of you to be like, oh my God, these classes are fantastic and are so helpful. So Connie, what we'll do is we'll grab your email, and I will, either Chuck or I will be in touch with you with the gift code to get those free workshops.
Well, you know what the joy was, John, and Heather will understand, and anyone else that has an HRCI or a SHRM, is that I designed, developed, and delivered these classes, and I all of a sudden realized, oh my gosh, January 31st, I got to get all my credits listed on SHRM and HRCI. So when I went in and I realized, oh my gosh, we've done all these classes, designed, developed, and I get some great credits for these. So immediately, so boom, I'm done with my SHRM. I still have a few more to do with my HRCI. But yeah, that was the most exciting thing. Yeah, I'm sure no one else waits till the last minute out there, right? But there you go.
Yeah. So Chuck, I want to talk about performance.
Yeah.
So as you know, I have been focusing probably for the last 10 years on performance and why people, whether they're an HR professional, leadership development, a leader, manager, supervisor, frontline employee, why they're successful in the workplace, right? Because I really wanted to understand that, because I think it's so important in our roles to make sure that we understand that. And so what I found was that the common denominator that makes people excel in the workplace is the ability to consistently make the right decisions in the moment. And so that made sense to me, and it was pretty straightforward. And everyone I ever talked to is like, yeah, of course, John, making decisions, of course, that makes us successful. But after looking at that, right, after diving into that, I was wondering if there were factors that allowed us to get there, right? And so, are there factors that allow us to be there? And so, when I got there, I realized that there are 8 drivers of performance.
Yeah, you would think it's simple, but it's not. But I love how you've broken this all down through your research.
Yeah, and so the first one is direction, right? Knowing where we're going. The next two are knowledge and ability, which is what we think about when we're building a job description. Do they have the knowledge? Do they have the ability to do the job? And then systems, right? And having the systems, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, having the resources. The one that I just added, literally added last week, was social support.
Mm.
And we've seen this a lot in Gallup. When Gallup does their engagement, they're like, do you have a best friend at work? And so that allows that person, that social connection, allows us to make better decisions, the environment in which we're working, and then finally the energy.
Mm-hmm.
So each one of these helps us make better decisions. But today, I think what I want us to do, Chuck, is really concentrate on systems because it's the new year.
Yeah.
Um, because they allow us that consistency, right? They allow us to consistently make the right decisions in there.
Yeah, you're right. It's not enough to get it right once. You need to get it right if you want to be successfully consistent. Successful consistently.
Yeah.
But it does remind me of a story that I just absolutely love. I wrote an article about this a couple of months ago on my HR in a Nutshell newsletter on LinkedIn. You and I have talked about this story, and it's the story of the B-17 bomber. Now, I know our folks in the audience are going to be like, what does the B-17 bomber have to do with HR? Folks, stay with me. Stay with me, camera guy. Stay with me. So I want to take you back. I want to go back in time to a time when this was a complex flying machine in the new age of airplanes. And it's 1935. And Boeing has just developed something called the B-17, B standing for bomber, and it eventually better came known as the Flying Fortress. And it really was a marvel of modern engineering. It was faster, it was more powerful, it was capable of carrying more bombs than anything the military had seen before. It was an absolute game changer. But in the early test flights, and actually, I kind of skim over this, but it was a big test flight. It was the test flight. Generals were there, Boeing executives were there, and they're watching this test flight very closely, and senior military leaders, and then something goes really wrong. Shortly after takeoff of this B-17, the plane veers and crashes. And as it turned out, they dissected this, they went back in, what went wrong? And they found out it was not because of mechanical issues. The plane worked perfectly. The reason was human error. It was human error. And the highly experienced pilots had forgotten to release something called the elevator lock. It was a small, but it was a crucial step. And so the crash could have spelled disaster for Boeing. They almost lost the contract. And in fact, the Army initially thought this plane is way too complex to fly. But rather than scrapping the B-17, Boeing took a different approach. And it's an approach, John, that carries over to today, where they didn't redesign the plane, they redesigned the process, and their solution was a pre-flight, are you ready? Drum roll, please. Checklist. So, hey, that's how this goes. And yeah, so it goes a little further. I just want to just indulge me just another 30 seconds. So with the checklist, this checklist, pilots no longer had to rely on memory to handle the complexities of this advanced aircraft, right? The checklist guided them through these crucial steps needed for a safe flight, no matter the pressure they were under. With the checklist in hand, even inexperienced pilots could safely operate the B-17. It saved Boeing's future. The simple checklist saved Boeing's future. Not only did the Army choose the B-17, but it went on to play a pivotal role in the winning of World War II. So a checklist saved, well, World War II for, help win World War II for the United States and its allies. So anyways, more than just a checklist. In this case, it's proving that even the most complex challenges can be managed with the right systems in place, going back to your checklist of items up there.
Yeah, and I think that's fascinating, but what the heck does this have to do with HR? Like, what's the connection between a war machine of 1935, Chuck, and today, 2025,
Yeah.
HR?
Great question. So while HR and Flying Bomber may seem worlds apart, they share a common challenge: complexity. There's a lot of complexity in HR. Just like the B-17 was an advanced flying machine, there are countless moving parts HR professionals are dealing with every day, whether it's onboarding new employees, compliance management, payroll processing, employee investigations, even terminations. I mean, hey, we got to remember IT needs to disable the accounts. We got to collect company equipment. I got to remember, geez, do they have direct deposit? Do they have daily pay, which is an ADP thing? Did they turn in their uniforms? I will even tell you right now, when we hire folks, we're hiring regular employees, John. We're hiring part-time, seasonal. We're hiring J1 visa employees. We're hiring H-2B visa employees. And now we're hiring something called a TN visa employee. And I got to, we're making little mistakes. My folks are making little mistakes. I said, look, we need a checklist on when we hire this person. When we hire J1s, we got to remember to put the tax blocks on. We got to remember they're hired full-time, but they're not hired full-time to get benefits. But H-2Bs, they're hired full-time. So the different visas and that sort of thing. But the pilots, and that's the deal, John, the pilots here didn't make a mistake because they lacked skill or knowledge. I don't lack skill or knowledge. My HR manager doesn't lack skill or knowledge, and my coordinator, well, she's coming along, but she's getting it too, right? And so she doesn't lack a lot of skill or knowledge either. And what she does lack, we're helping make up with checklists. They made these mistakes because they had to remember so much, and that's where things fall through the cracks. And the same's true for HR. We can be the most experienced professional in the room, but when we're juggling dozens of priorities and you're trying to do something and there's that ever-present knock on the door, hey, Chuck, do you have a minute? And I'll bet you the folks in our studio audience know exactly what I'm talking about. And then you forget what you were doing. It's easy to overlook something small that can be a bigger problem. My general manager right now, his big thing is, Chuck, small things are big things. Small things are big things, and missing that compliance deadline, skipping a termination step, forgetting to follow up. Anyways, I could go on. I could go on and on and on.
Yeah, and then to me, right, and I think where checklists, again, I can go into my other lives, my other careers where checklists were important, but it's that, and I envision us as HR professionals, right? We're working, and I think that's a great example. We're working, we're getting this done, and then somebody comes, knocks on the door, our phone rings, or I almost said pager, our cell phone goes off, and all of a sudden we're distracted, and then we go back to what we were doing, and we don't know where we're at. And so either we're repeating steps or we're skipping steps and doing that. In the foreword of our book, The Ultimate Guide to HR, I tell this story of where one of my friends, she was a director of HR, one of her managers forgot to let IT know, right? That somebody was being terminated, and it became a major issue in their organization. And so those are the things where I think a lot of us think, oh, I don't need a checklist for this. I can do it. But boy, having that checklist kind of goes in there as well. All right, so Chuck, it's time for our next giveaway. And so we're going to give away, this is the first time we're doing this. Just in case you don't know, ladies and gentlemen, today is the day that our book launched on Amazon. Yeah, Amazon.com. The Ultimate Guide to HR. You can get it there. You can get the Kindle version. You can get the printed version. And you can get a hard copy version with a hard copy book. And so what we're going to do right now is we're going to give away an autographed copy of the hard copy book. And so you're going to have to give us a while for us to get it because I got to get it here. I got to autograph it. Then I got to send it to Chuck in Florida. He's got to autograph it. And then we got to send it to you. But it will get to you. All right. So I guess we're going to close my eyes and I'm going to pick somebody from the list. Here I
There
go.
you
Hopefully,
go.
I'm going to do that. All right. You ready?
Yeah.
I
Don't
pick
pick me.
Chuck. No, Tara Young. Tara Young is our
Tara.
winner.
Woo! Do.
Yeah. So Tara, we will get that to you. We're gonna need to get your address, but we'll email you and you can send that to us. But we'll get you the autographed copy. For the rest of you, if you guys want to go to Amazon.com, it's the ultimate guide to HR. You can definitely get it there. Get the Kindle version, get the print version, and so we can do that as well.
John, I want to talk a little bit about your theory is we don't want people to read this book. We want people to use it, right? I like how you say that. It is not a book you read front to back. It is a useful type book. And why don't you share that? And then I'm going to talk about the different types of checklists for our audience, because they may say this is great, but sometimes I may need my own checklist to create that. So I want to give some insight there.
Yeah. And so Tara says, I bought the earlier release PDF ages ago. But you'll have the hard copy and it's the new version. So we did update it for, well, we updated, I don't want to say for 2025, but we did update it this year. So it's updated. There's the proof Chuck has in there.
There it is. 2.28 pounds, I think. And it is so cool to be holding an actual book right here. So
there's something to be about that, having a book. And so
I love the smell of books
in the morning. And so I've been thinking about this book and I've been talking to my friends and I'm like, oh, I just wrote this book. And they're like, oh, I don't read. I don't want to go through all that. And I'm thinking, wait, this book isn't meant to be read, right? It's not meant to be read. It's meant to be used. And what I would love to see for everybody is when I come into your office, that the book is coffee stained, it's earmarked, there's scribbles all over it, it's written, it's messed up. That's what I want to see. It's not something that you're going to pick up and read cover to cover, right? It's just not, that's not the way it works. You're going to be like, oh, I have a sexual harassment investigation coming up. Let me make sure I'm doing that right. Or I have a termination that I'm going to do. And so that's what I want to see. I get really excited about that because I want it to be used. I don't want it just to sit there.
Yeah. We both get excited. We both get excited about these things. So as we kind of roll towards the end of our episode today, I do want to share, some of my favorite checklists and the two different types of checklists. So you yourself, folks, if you're saying, geez, I want to do a checklist, and you might be like, hey, it's easy. I just write some things down, whatever. But there actually are two types of checklists. And if you think and structure it, you'll know where I'm going. So right off the bat, I would say for me, my two favorite checklists are the investigations checklist and the HR audits checklist, because I created them from, well, experience. Like as I was doing multiple HR departmental audits and as I was doing multiple investigations, I actually used them as I created them. And I want to share, there are two types of checklists. And there's the read, do checklist, and then there's the do, confirm models. So the first checklist I'm going to talk about, John, and then you could talk about the do, confirm model. It's the read, do model, and that's what the sexual harassment checklist is, and that's what the HR audit checklist is. And that's when you read the checklist and you do what it says. The read, do model. You follow it step by step, reading and performing each task as you go along. And so a read, do checklist is good for tasks that are complex or infrequent. We're missing a step could lead to what you might consider significant consequences. It's good for detailed, high stakes processes where following that set procedure is essential, like employee investigations, using that to guide you through interviewing employees, documenting the findings, reviewing outcomes. Terminations, right? Following the checklist to ensure IT disables access, collects company property, updates payroll. I think we all know those, right? And then the onboarding checklist, which I don't have to go to because I think everyone here has done some measure of onboarding. So that's the do, read checklist. The next one is the do, confirm, or the read. Well, you talk about the do confirm checklist, John. I'm going to turn that over to you.
Yeah, and so I always think about this, and I have a little different perspective than Chuck. Is I think if I have somebody that, and so in Chuck's case, right, we were talking about the sexual harassment. In some organizations, we have an individual that's their only job, right? And so when we're thinking about the do and confirm checklist, I think about independent contractors, right? And so for me, the independent contractor, I have been so involved in working with deciding whether that person's an employee or an independent contractor in many, many different organizations, I kind of know it by heart. Like I know the process by heart. And so the do confirm checklist, or the approach, the method is I know it, but I want to make sure that I'm confirming it, right? And so I know that I'm going to check the IRS 20-factor test. I'm going to look at my state's ABC test and see what it says in terms of workman's comp. I'm going to be looking at the Department of Labor, either the 6 economic reality test or whatever the new Trump administration comes up with. I know I'm going to look at those 3, right? And then I'm going to make the decision. Now, when I get to that point, it goes, all right, what else do I need to do?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to miss anything. And that's why the do confirm comes up, because now I can go to the checklist and go, yep, did that, did that, did that. Oh, I forgot to make sure they did a W-9 when they started working. And I got, gosh, it's January. I got to get their 1099 out, right? And so all of those things just kind of remind me, really important to kind of get that.
Yeah. And I think of that type of checklist as a safety net, in a way, a safety net checklist.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a great way to kind of look at that and kind of think about doing that as well.
Yeah. John, we could go on and on, but let's give away our last giveaway. And actually, we had 2 more. One was going to be a consultation with John and Chuck. So I don't know of our group here if there's anyone that particularly really wants that, where you and I spend like, what, 30-ish, we say 30 minutes, but it goes a little longer.
Yeah, it's
Just
gonna be over an
just to
hour.
kind of, what you got going on. You want to run something by us. I'm now working as an HR director at a large resort in the Florida Keys. I was HR consulting for 5 years or so. I took a kind of a pause in that, but I'm still maintaining some HR consultancy. And as we do our HR Stories podcast, John is a leadership guru. So if you're someone that really wants that, let us know, and we'll definitely pick you, throw you in the hat. If someone's like, hey, I don't need to talk to Chuck and John, then we'll go from there. But there is a small business guide to HR that John and I kind of, I don't know, we kind of, as we were writing our checklist book and we were writing all of our classes, this one kind of came up. It's almost like a miniature book, whatever, but it is
It's a companion piece.
it's a companion piece. Thank you, John. A companion piece. So much more eloquent than how I'm describing it. Anyways, our small business guide to HR and our stay interviews guide. John, you wrote the stay interviews. Why are they so important? Let me just throw that out there.
Yeah, so this is a bundle. We're going to give a bundle away of the Small Business Guide to HR and my book, Stay Interviews. And so I love the concept of stay interviews when I first understood it, right? So we all know what the exit interview is, when somebody leaves the company and we interview them to know what's going on. The concept behind this, and I forget who was the one that brought this to the forefront, but the concept was we should be interviewing those people that are staying. Why are they staying? And then change the way our culture is built to make sure that we're getting the people. Now, when I say stay, I mean the people that we want to stay, not the people that are the hanger-oners, but the people that stay. And so I love that concept of talking to people that are loyal, that want to be at my job and work, and find out why they stay. And then use that to build my benefits package, use that to build the culture. So we have a lot of that. All right, Chuck, it's time to do your fancy
a lot of pressure,
pointing.
a lot of pressure. So I was gonna say it obviously we've got Connie and Tara have already won something, correct?
Yeah.
and Ladise is in here. I saw her. Ladise gets consultation from me all the time because, well, she's my HR manager. So she gets free consultation all the time. So, but we're giving away the book right now. So let's go for, and I got Greta Ashburn. Woo! Dun 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 dun. Okay.
We
So
will.
Greta,
I will send you a link, Greta, for that. They're both digital downloads, so we can get those to you there as well. So we'll get your. I'll send you an email, so we can get those to you on there.
all right, great. And then, do you want to just do the consultation, John?
Yeah, well, no one put in there. If anybody's interested in doing the consultation, let us know. And then we'll pick you if everyone wants it, we can pick from the group too as well. Okay. All right. So we have, all right, Chuck, ready? I'm sending you a secret code.
Okay.
And I want you to pick between two people. Let me see. You know what, Chuck? Why don't we do this? Why don't we just do both of them?
Sure. Okay. There you go. Heather and Kelly, congratulations. You are the grand prize winners. You get to spend time with Chuck and John. So that's great. And actually, for me, it's a grand prize because I've worked with Heather in the past, and she is wonderful. So maybe I'm winning by spending time with Heather.
I love that we can interact with the audience like this. So this is a great chance. So we wanted to give, at the end of our things, we talked about our books, we talked about everything, we talked about kind of preparing for next year. One of the things that I would mention for all of you is we did do, our last episode was an audit episode where we talked about what audits you should be doing for 2025. So go back and listen to that. But any last thoughts?
No, folks, thank you for being here. Thank you for being gracious and allowing us to do this. Thank you for spending 1 hour. Everyone stayed with us for the hour. And overall, if you're listening to this on the recording, it is the HR Stories Podcast live edition where there is a lesson in every story.
Thank you for listening to the HR Stories Podcast. The material presented in this podcast is for informational purposes only. Chuck and John always recommend using an employment lawyer or HR consultant to handle any legal concerns or HR issues. We do our best to double check sources and make sure the information we are providing is accurate. We may eliminate or embellish without changing the basic narrative to make the story easier to understand. In certain circumstances, we may change identifying information to protect the innocent. The HR Stories broadcast is brought to you by the team at HR Stories. The team at HR Stories is designed to help anyone with HR responsibilities be better at managing the employee experience. To engage with us, go to the hrstoriesteam.com and learn more about how the team at HR Stories can support your business or nonprofit. Thank you for listening to the HR Stories Podcast, where there is a lesson in every story.